Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books. Today I'm going to be doing my March wrap-up and my April TBR. March was a crazy month. If you saw my vlog, it was a little bit of a crazy month. However, I did manage to finish 7 books. Yes, 7. One of them was left over from February, but hey, that's okay. So all of the books that I read in March, for the most part, I liked all of them. I liked them all. There wasn't one that I didn't like. So that makes ranking them in any sort of order very, very, very difficult. And there's a couple that I kept going back and forth on, switching around. But here's my final ranking of all the books that I read in March. Starting with number 7. Seize the Night by Sherrilyn Kenyon. If you're not familiar with her, Sherrilyn Kenyon has a whole series of these books that are basically supernatural romance stories. So typically they're about human women that fall in love and have these wild romantic stories with these godlike creatures, and there's demons and there's gods and there's all this crazy stuff going on. And a lot of her books have a whole lot of steam in them. I mean, that's basically why you read them, for the steam. This book, however, while it does have the steam, I found that by the end of the story that there was just way too much plot in this book. Like, there was only maybe 3 steamy scenes, and one of them involved food. And I don't know about you, but at this point in my life, I don't find food sexy. I just don't. Maybe when I was younger, not now. Now I think it's kind of gross. So to me, there was really only 2 steamy scenes, even though technically there were 3. But that's why it's on the bottom of the list. I still enjoyed it overall. It made me laugh and it made me chuckle, but didn't have exactly all the steam that I was looking for. Number 6 is going to be the Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. First of all, can we just say, how gorgeous is this cover? So beautiful, so beautiful. I really enjoyed this story. It's about a young girl, and in the world that she lives in, there are normal red-blooded people, and then there are people with gold blood. I believe all the gold-blooded people are women. If you're found out to have gold blood, though, that basically means that you're impure and you're kind of killed. However, the character in this story, when she gets discovered that she has this gold blood, she is saved by this person who basically takes her to the emperor and is like, hey, I'm putting together this elite warrior army, section of the army, all filled with these gold-blooded girls, because turns out they're actually super powerful and they can't be killed. Well, they can't be killed in the normal way. It's a little confusing. Maybe I'll talk about it more when I go into do a deep dive review, but overall, I really enjoyed this one. For a YA fantasy, I think it's really, really fun. It's got some good stuff going on in it. It also has a bunch of stuff, though, that I feel like I've heard a bunch of times before, like the whole thing with the blood and impurity. I've read that in the Red Queen series and other series, trying to put down women when they're secretly super powerful. I've heard these things like before. So because it didn't have anything that was, I felt super new, like that's why it's a little bit lower on the list, but I still enjoyed it overall. Even if it doesn't have a lot of like new things, I've read these things a million times before, I do appreciate the new take on it, and I do appreciate the fun story that it was. My 5th favorite book of March is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This was actually recommended to me by one of my followers over on Bookstagram, and I'm so glad it was recommended to me because, again, this was a really fun book. It's about a young African-American girl going to college down in the Carolinas, and she sees something mysterious one day, and of course, she's the type of character that needs to know what she saw and what happened. And what she ends up finding out is that there's this whole, like, secret society on campus of kids that are basically, like, descendant from Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So I had no idea going into this book that it was about Arthurian legend, but I thought that part was super, super cool. So that's kind of like one part of the story. The The other part of the story is that our main character, Bree, has suffered like a really serious tragedy in her life. So she spends a lot of the book both being angry about this tragedy that happened to her and also trying to figure out why she has some mysterious powers. Because she has powers that are different from all these descendants of Arthur and his knights. What she has is different, and she doesn't know why. No one knows why. But it kind of leads her on this path of not only self-discovery about herself, but discovery about her ancestors and how her ancestors, where they came from, and what happened to them in the course of American history, how that crossed with Arthurian legend. And that may sound kind of confusing the way that I'm trying to explain it, and probably not doing a good job because I'm trying to be vague, but I think the way that it's done in this story is super cool and super fun. Again, the only reason that it's slightly lower on my list is because there is a pretty significant twist at the end. And even now, like a week after having finished this one, I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I said this in my vlog, but I'll say it again here. Part of me thinks that the twist was really cool and really exciting. The other part of me felt like the twist was really random because there wasn't enough set up for it. So I still don't know which side of the coin I'm on. But for the most part, other than the twist though, I really enjoyed this one. All right, number 3 and number 4 were two of the ones that I kept going back and forth on, and honestly, I just switched the order right before filming this video. So my 4th pick for March is going to be Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Yes, Crown of Midnight, sequel to Throne of Glass, which if you've been following me, you know I really enjoyed that one. And guess what? I really enjoyed this one too. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great sequel to Throne of Glass. I can really see like the potential that this series has, because Throne of Glass I feel like was a very contained story, and this one like really expands the world. And I've heard that as the series goes on, it just keeps expanding and expanding. So I'm really looking forward to that. The only minor complaint I have about this book, and again, this is minor and just me, but I did find that some of the plot points were very predictable. Like, it sets up this big reveal at the end, or at least the book makes it seem like it's a big reveal, but I saw that coming like miles away. And maybe it's just me because I've read so many of the stories that trope, I knew what was going to happen. But I feel like the story made it seem like it was a big deal, but to me it wasn't a big deal because, like I said, I already knew what it was. I would really love to talk to someone who's read this one so I can ask them if they thought it was a big twist or if they saw it coming like I did. So if you've read this one, let me know in the comments below. No spoilers. So even though I did roll my eyes at the predictability of the story, I still really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to continue with this series. So that brings me to my 3rd favorite book of March, which is going to be The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. The Raven King. This might be my favorite book in the Raven cycle since book 1. I really loved book 1. And I liked book 2 and I liked book 3, but I really liked book 4. I think that this book has one of the most creative endings that I've ever read in like a YA fantasy story. The way that it's written and the way that the story is structured is like totally different from anything that I've ever read, and I really appreciate that. I read so much fantasy, like something has to be really good or different in order to like catch my attention, and this book is it. So this whole series has been an absolute joy to read this year. It's definitely going to end up on my favorites of the year. I just have to figure out if I liked book 1 better or book 4 better. I'm thinking because this one is so unique that it's probably going to be this one. But man, this is just a great conclusion to the series. There's so many wonderful and amazing characters in here. So much drama, so much plot, so much packed into this little book. Well, maybe I guess it's not that little, but so much packed in here. Really, really, really love this one. So what could I possibly have loved more than The Raven King? My number one and my number two, again, are both books that I kept going back and forth on because these are two books that made me emotional, like actually physically made me cry, and are very powerful and are very good, but in very different ways. Like, so very different, very different. So number two, the book that I'm putting at number two is going to be The Green Mile by Stephen King. If you have seen the movie, you know what happens in this book. And if you haven't seen the movie or haven't read the book, I'm not going to ruin it here. But I will just say, even if you have seen the movie, that is not going to emotionally prepare you for reading the book. Because I knew what was going to happen and I knew what was coming. And it still, like, absolutely destroyed my soul. Like, this book is... It's horrifying, it's sad, but it's also beautiful at the same time. And I know that sounds weird to say, but these are the Stephen King stories that I like best. The ones that mix horror with, like, human emotions, that mix horror with beauty, that mix horror with, I don't know, just things that really touch your soul. There's no, like, you know, big supernatural monster in this story, no Pennywise the clown. There is a little bit of magic, but it's not in the way that you would think. This is really a story about people, about humans, and about the way that people think about each other, the way that people treat each other. And it's just, like, sad is not even a good enough word for how, like, depressing this book is. So it is really sad, but it's also really beautiful at the same time. So the only reason I put it at number two and not at number one is because at the end of the day, I didn't like feeling that sad. I'm not a sad person, and I didn't like the fact that this book made me feel so sad, but it is an amazing story. It's so amazing. So if you've seen the movie but haven't read the book yet, go and read the book. So that brings me to my number one favorite book of March, and that is going to be Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman. I don't know why this book was such a surprise because I loved A Man Called Ove. I love that book. That book made me laugh. That book made me cry. And the same thing happened here. This book also made me laugh, and it also made me cry, but it made me cry more than once. It made me cry because there were some, like, shocking things that happened in the plot that I did not see coming that were really sad. But then it also made me cry because there were some good things that happened too. So I had, like, multiple cries reading this story. Unlike The Green Mile, where the cry was mostly sad, here it was both. It was sad and happy. So because of that, that's why I put it at number one. But it's a charming story about a little old lady who is just trying to, like, figure out her life after she's just gotten out of this marriage that she's been in through most her life. So she doesn't even know, like, how to do certain things because her husband always did them for her. She never worked, and now she's trying to find a job. She gets sent out to this, like, town out in the boondocks that, like, you know, one of those towns that, like, people forget even is there. But when she meets the town people and the children and gets involved in, let's say, recreational activities, like, it's just a really, really sweet story. It is a sweet story. It's heartwarming. Yes, it is sad at times, but it's also really hopeful and happy too. So because of that, because it ends on a high note, a positive note, and not such a depressing one like The Green Mile, that's why I decided to put this one, Britt-Marie Was Here, at number one. So there you have it. Those are all my books ranked for March. So now I'm going to quickly go through what I'm going to be reading in April, which is a very random stack of books, very random. But starting with my reader recommendation of the month, Once Upon a Wardrobe by Patti Callahan. This was recommended to me by Kristen's Reading Nook over on Bookstagram, and it's about a girl with a sick brother who is obsessed with the Chronicles of Narnia. So he sends his sister out to track down the author, C.S. Lewis, and to find out where Narnia really comes from. I was a huge fan of Narnia as a kid. I mean, I still am. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was one of my favorite stories as a child. Favorite. And if you ever saw like the old 80s cartoon, I used to beg my mother to like rent it from the library. I used to love watching that on cassette. So very curious to see how the story goes. I hear it's really good, so hopefully it will be. Next up in my Stephen King journey is Desperation, which I've been looking forward to reading this one because I've heard good things about it, but oh man, it's another chunker. It is another chunker. And you're going to see I have a lot of chunky books this month. And so I had to slip some like significantly less chunky ones in there. But Desperation, I honestly have no idea what this one's about. I'm going in blind. I want to go in blind. So wish me luck. Next up, I have my adult fantasy of the month, and this is going to be another chunker, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I picked this up at a Barnes & Noble sale like a year ago, and again, I've been putting it off because it's super chunky, but I really wanted to read more Brandon Sanderson this year. I've only ever read the original Mistborn trilogy, haven't read anything else by him, and I really want to. This was the only one I had, so I'm diving in. Whew, this one's like 1,000 pages, so hopefully I can finish it before the end of the month. I did get a little bit of a head start, so hopefully that will work in my favor. Next up, I have my rando book of the month. This is where I just kind of pick something randomly off my shelf. Could be historical fiction, could be romance, and this month it is Covet by Tracy Wolff. So this is the third book in her series. Some of you may remember that I read both Crave and Crush last year, so I am super excited to finally be continuing this one with Covet. This series is silly. It's basically an updated version of Twilight, but way more ridiculous and over the top. And I loved book 1 and book 2, so hopefully I will love book 3 as well. Next up, I have my YA fantasy of the month, and I am taking a break from the Throne of Glass series from Sarah J. Maas to read a book that I've been wanting to read for what feels like forever, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is another one that I've had on my shelf for a little while and I've been wanting to read, and I know that season 2 of Shadow and Bone recently came out on Netflix. I want to watch it, but I'm going to read the book first, then I'm going to watch season 2, and we'll see what happens. So, as you saw, I have some very chunky books on my list this month. So when it came time to pick out a middle grade book, I had a little bit of trouble because most of the middle grade books that I have are all part of these big series, and some of them are like 500 plus pages long, and I was like, I cannot handle another 500 plus page book. I just can't. So I managed to find a book that was in the back of my bookshelf that I have had since, I'm going to say, the early 2000s, that I have never read, and that's going to be The Guardians of Ga'Hoole. Some of you may remember that in the early 2000s there was actually a movie that came out, the what was it called? The Owls of Ga'Hoole, Legend of Ga'Hoole. But this is actually a whole series about owls. The first one is The Guardians of Ga'Hoole. I loved the movie. I thought it was great. So that's why I picked up this book at like a book sale many years ago, like 15 years ago, like so long ago, but I just never read it. So look, it's a short little book. So it was really perfect. And I figured, hey, it's better late than never. I'm finally going to read this one. And finally, last but not least, that brings me to my book box book of the month, and that is going to be Revelle by Lyssa Mia Smith. Lyssa Mia Smith. I'm never going to remember that. Anywho, I have a ton of Owl Crate book box books that I've gotten that I have not read, and I just got this one last month. However, it really just calls to me. It really just calls to me. It takes place during like 1920s Prohibition era. There's like an island off the coast of Manhattan where there's like a magical circus, and it's just got a whole bunch of stuff that I really love that really piqued my interest. So I'm crossing my fingers that this one is as good as I hope that it is. So please keep your fingers crossed for me that I'm not disappointed. So there you have it. Those are all the books I'll be reading in April. And if you made it to the end of this video, you were rewarded with a Meepers. Hey Meepers, can you say hi to everyone? Tell everyone how you're doing, huh? Thank you, Meeps. Meepers is not the biggest fan of our new baby Swiper. She's not really the biggest fan of Roscoe either, but they kind of ignore each other. So now that we have the four, it's like Jack and Meepers are a couple, and Roscoe and Swiper are a separate couple. So it's like they've got a little bit of gang warfare going on, but it'll be okay. That's it for me today. So now I want to know, what was your favorite book in March? What are you planning on reading in April? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and more furry friends coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading. Thank you, Meepers.